Hi friends, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Just close them. I want you to think about something. Think about the last time you were standing at the edge of something. Maybe it was a new job, a new relationship, a new city, a new beginning. Maybe it was just a conversation you needed to have, a truth you needed to tell, a door you needed to knock on. And I want you to remember how you felt in that moment. That feeling in your chest, that tightness, that tightness, that voice inside your head saying, what if it doesn't work? What if I fall? What if they laugh? What if I lose everything? You can open your eyes now. That feeling you just remembered, that feeling right there, that is not weakness. That is not a warning sign. That is not the universe telling you to stop. That is the feeling of being alive at the edge of something extraordinary. And today I want to talk to you about what happens when you jump. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was once the most afraid person in any room I walked into. And I'm going to tell you about that. I'm going to tell you everything. Because I believe, with everything I have, that the only thing standing between you and the life you were made for is a risk you haven't taken yet. So let's talk about that risk. Let's talk about what it really means to become a risk taker. I grew up in a small town, and when I say small, I mean everyone knew everyone, everyone watched everyone, and everyone had an opinion about what everyone else should do with their life. My father was a factory worker. Honest man, hardworking man. Came home every night with grease on his hands and tiredness in his eyes. And I loved him. I loved him. I love him still. But I remember one night, I was maybe 10 years old, and I asked him, Dad, do you love your job? And he looked at me for a long time, a really long time, a really long time. And then he said, son, love doesn't pay the bills. And I carried those words with me for years. Love doesn't pay the bills. Be practical. Be safe. Don't reach too high. Don't dream too loud. Don't take risks you don't need to take. And so I grew up being careful. I was the kid who never raised his hand in class, even when he knew the answer. Because what if he was wrong and everyone laughed? I was the teenager who never asked the girl to the dance. Because what if she said no? I was the young man who got a decent job in a decent company in a decent city and told himself that decent was enough. That decent was good. That decent was safe. And for a while I believed it. For a while I sat in that office every single day and I did my work and I smiled at the right people and I said the right things and I went home at night and I sat on my couch and I watched other people live extraordinary lives on a screen and I told myself that's not for people like me. That's for the chosen ones, the lucky ones, the ones who had something I didn't have. But here's what I didn't understand then. Here's what took me years and pain and loss and failure to finally understand. Safe is not the same as happy. Careful is not the same as fulfilled. And a life without risk is not a life that has been protected. It is a life that has been quietly, slowly, painfully wasted. I want to say that again because I need you to hear it. A life without risk is not a life that has been protected. It is a life that has been wasted. And I don't want that for you. I don't want that for anyone in this room. I don't want that for the people watching this at home, on their phones, in their cars, in their bedrooms at 2 in the morning, because something inside them is restless and they don't know why. I know why. You're restless because you were made for more than safe. Let me tell you about a man named Howard Schultz. Howard Schultz grew up in the Bayview housing projects in Brooklyn, New York. His family had no money. His father broke his ankle at work one day, lost his job, lost his health insurance, lost his income. And the family had nothing. No safety net, no backup plan, nothing. Howard Schultz watched his father, a man who worked hard, who played by the rules, who did everything right, get crushed by a system that didn't care about him. And young Howard made himself a promise. He promised that if he ever built something, no one who worked for him would ever be left behind like that. Fast forward, Howard Schultz is a young man working for a small coffee company in Seattle, a company called Starbucks. At the time, Starbucks sold coffee beans, not brewed coffee, not lattes, just beans. And Howard travels to Italy for a trade show, and he walks into an espresso bar in Milan, and something happens to him. He sees it. He sees this community forming around coffee. He sees people having conversations, building relationships, slowing down in the middle of their busy day to just be present with one another. And he comes back to Seattle completely on fire. He goes to the founders of Starbucks and he says, We need to do this. We need to sell the experience. We need to sell the experience. The connection, the moment, not just the beans. And they said no. They weren't interested. They didn't want to change. They didn't see what he saw. So Howard Schultz did something terrifying. He left Starbucks. He left a stable job, a regular paycheck, the security of being part of something that was already working. And he started his own coffee company. And he went to 242 investors to raise money for his vision. 242 people. 217 of them said no. 217 people looked Howard Schultz in the eyes and said, "Your idea is not worth our money. Your dream is not worth our investment. Go back to selling beans." 217 rejections. And he kept going. He raised enough money. He built his company. He eventually bought Starbucks. And today, Starbucks has more than 35,000 locations in over 80 countries, serves tens of millions of customers every single day, and has made billions of dollars. But more than that, true to the promise he made to himself as a little boy watching his father fall apart, Starbucks was one of the first major companies to offer health insurance to part-time employees. 217 people said no. And because one man refused to stop, millions of people today have health care. Millions of people today have a warm place to sit. Millions of people today have a moment of connection in the middle of a hard day because one man was willing to take the risk. Ask yourself right now, what vision do you have that people are telling you no about? What dream are you carrying that the world keeps dismissing? What door have you knocked on that hasn't opened yet? Because I need you to understand something about Howard Schultz's story. The risk wasn't just financial. The risk was emotional. The risk was walking back into a room after the 216th, no one still believing that you have something worth fighting for. That is the hardest risk there is. The risk of continuing to believe in yourself when the whole world is casting doubt. That is the risk I want you to take today. There is a psychological phenomenon that researchers call the comfort zone. And we talk about it all the time in motivation. Get out of your comfort zone. Push past your comfort zone. But I want to reframe that for you today because I think the phrase comfort zone is actually a lie. It's not a comfort zone, it's a familiar zone. And familiar is not the same as comfortable. Familiar is not the same as happy. Familiar is not the same as alive. Think about it. So many of us stay in situations that are actually causing us pain, painful jobs, painful relationships, painful patterns, painful habits, because even though they hurt us, they are familiar. We know what to expect. We know the shape of the suffering, and somehow our brains decide that known suffering is safer than unknown possibility. Isn't that wild? Isn't that just the strangest, saddest, most heartbreakingly human thing you've ever heard? We will choose a pain we recognize over a joy we haven't yet experienced. We will choose the devil we know over the angel we don't. And the risk taker, the true risk taker, is the person who looks at that familiar pain, that comfortable misery, that known ceiling, and says, I would rather leap into the unknown than spend one more day in a life that is smaller than the one I was meant to live. I want to be that person. And I believe you do too, or you wouldn't be here right now. Let me tell you about a woman named J.K. Rowling. In 1994, Joanne Rowling was sitting on a delayed train from Manchester to London. She had no paper, her pen barely worked, and she was just a young woman going somewhere, thinking about something. And in that moment, on that train, in that delay, in that small, unremarkable moment, a boy appeared in her mind. A boy who didn't know he was a wizard. Harry Potter was born on a delayed train. Now here's what I need you to know about what came next, because we all know how the story ends. We know about the movies and the theme parks and the billions of dollars and the generations of children who grew up with those books in their hands and magic in their hearts. But do you know what came before that? Do you know what it cost her? At the time she was writing Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling was a single mother. Her marriage had fallen apart. She had a baby daughter. She was living in a small flat in Edinburgh, Scotland. She was on welfare. She was so poor that she couldn't afford to photocopy her manuscript. So she typed it twice, by hand, on an old manual typewriter. Twice. Because she couldn't afford the copying, she finished the manuscript. She sent it to 12 literary agents in London. All 12 said no. 12 people read the story of Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the boy who made the whole world fall in love with reading again, and said, not for us, not worth it, not good enough. One agreed to take her on. And even then, 8 major publishing houses rejected the book before a small publisher called Bloomsbury finally agreed to publish it. Mostly because the chairman's 8-year-old daughter read the first chapter and demanded to know what happened next. An 8-year-old girl changed the world by asking for more of a story. And J.K. Rowling, this woman who was broke, who was alone, who was told no over and over and over again, she became the first person in history to become a billionaire by writing books. But she almost didn't. She almost gave up. She has said in interviews that during that period of her life, she was severely depressed. She was struggling. She was questioning everything. She hit what she later called rock bottom. And from that rock bottom, from that dark, painful, terrifying place, she wrote one of the most beloved stories in the history of human civilization. What would the world have lost if she had stopped? What is the world losing right now? Because you stopped. Because you told yourself it was too hard. Because you told yourself it was too late. Because you told yourself that the 12 no's you got were a verdict on your worth, on your talent, on your future, when in reality they were just data, just information. Just the universe saying, not this door. Try another door. The door exists. I promise you, the door exists. But you have to keep walking to find it. I want to talk about fear for a moment, because we can't have this conversation without talking about fear. Fear is the river between where you are and where you want to be. And so many of us stand on the bank of that river and we look across and we can see it. The life we want, the person we want to be, the work we want to do, the love we want to have. We can see it right there, right across that river. And we don't jump in because the water looks cold. Because we don't know how deep it is. Because what if there are currents? What if there are things beneath the surface we can't see? Fear is not your enemy. I want you to hear that. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is information. Fear is your body saying, this is big enough to be afraid of. And if something is big enough to be afraid of, it is big enough to change your life. The things that scare you the most are almost always the things that matter the most. Think about the most important things in your life. The things you love the most deep. The people you care about the most fiercely. The work that gives your life the most meaning. I would be willing to bet that every single one of those things required you at some point to be terrified and go anyway. Because love is terrifying, and purpose is terrifying, and greatness is terrifying, and greatness is terrifying. And the moment you stop being afraid of something, it usually means you've stopped caring about it. So don't try to get rid of the fear. Don't try to silence it. Don't try to armor yourself against it. Dance with it. Walk beside it. Look at it and say, yes, I see you. I know you're here. I know this is real, and I'm going anyway. That is courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than the fear. That the person you're becoming is more important than the comfort you're protecting. That the life waiting for you on the other side of the risk is worth more than the safety of the life you have right now. I want to tell you about the worst day of my life. I had built something. After years of playing it safe, of doing what was expected, of living that decent, careful life, I finally did it. I took a risk. I left the corporate job. I started my own business. I invested everything I had. My savings, my time, my reputation, my relationships, my sleep, my health. I poured it all in. And for a while it was working. For a while I could feel it. The momentum, the growth. The sense that this was real, that this was mine, that I had finally bet on myself and the bet was paying off. And then it fell apart. I'm not going to go into all the details. Some of it was bad decisions on my part. Some of it was circumstances I couldn't control. Some of it was timing. Some of it was just the brutal, unromantic reality that sometimes you do everything right and things still go wrong. But the outcome was the same. The business failed. The money was gone. And I was standing in an empty office at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in November, holding a box of the few personal things I'd kept there. And I remember looking around that empty space and thinking, I told you so. I told you so, that voice. But that voice that had been with me my whole life, the one my father's words had helped to build, the careful voice, the cautious voice, the voice that said, don't reach too high and love doesn't pay the bills and people like us don't do things like that. That voice came roaring back. And it said, I told you so. You should have stayed safe. You should have stayed small. You should have stayed where you belong. I went home that night and I sat in the dark for a long time. And I thought about giving up. I really thought about it. I thought about going back, finding another corporate job, getting another steady paycheck, being decent and careful and safe again. And then something happened. I was sitting there in the dark, and I remembered something my daughter had said to me a few weeks before all of this fell apart. She was 5 years old. We were driving somewhere, I don't even remember where, and she was in the back seat, and out of nowhere she said, Daddy, you always seem happy now. And I said, What do you mean, baby? And she said, Before, when you had the other job, you used to come home and you looked tired in a sad way. But now you come home tired in a happy way. Tired in a happy way. She was 5 years old and she could already see the difference between a man who was exhausted from playing it safe and a man who was exhausted from building something that mattered. And sitting there in the dark, I realized something. The business had failed. But I hadn't failed. The business had fallen. But the person I had become in the building of it, the courage I had found, the capability I had developed, the clarity I had earned, that hadn't fallen. That couldn't be taken from me. And that person, that version of me who had been willing to risk, to try, to build, to bet on himself, that person was not going back to being small. I got up the next morning and I started again. There is a concept in Japanese culture called kintsugi. It's the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. When a bowl or a vase breaks, instead of throwing it away or trying to hide the cracks, the artist fills the cracks with gold lacquer. And the philosophy behind it is this: the breaking is part of the beauty. The repair is not a flaw, it is a feature. The brokenness doesn't diminish the object, it makes it more valuable, more beautiful, more unique, more real. I want you to think about your life through the lens of kintsugi. Every failure you've experienced, every risk that didn't pay, every dream that got shattered, every time you were brave enough to try and the world was cruel enough to say not yet, all of those cracks in you, all of those breaks, all of that damage, all of that beautiful, hard-earned, painful experience, that is not a reason to hide yourself. That is not something to be ashamed of. That is not evidence that you're not enough. That is your gold. Every scar you carry is proof that you were willing to fight for something. Every failure is proof that you are willing to try something. Every wound is proof that you are willing to feel something. And people who have never been broken don't understand what broken people understand. People who have never failed don't know what failures know. People who have never risked anything don't have access to the wisdom that risk gives you. That risk gives you. Your brokenness is your wisdom. Your cracks are your gold. And the most qualified person in the world to teach someone how to survive is not someone who has never been hurt. It's someone who has been destroyed and rebuilt themselves from scratch. It's someone who has stood in the ruins of what they built and decided, consciously, deliberately, with full knowledge of the cost, to build again. That person is not naive. That person is not reckless. That person is not unaware of the risk. That person is the bravest person in the room. I want to talk about regret for a moment, because I think regret is one of the most important and least discussed concepts in the human experience. There's a palliative care nurse. Her name is Bronnie Ware, who spent years working with people in the last weeks of their lives. And she started writing down the things her patients said, the things they wish they had done differently, their regrets. And she collected these regrets and wrote about them in a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. Do you want to know what the number one regret was? Not what you'd expect. It wasn't I wish I'd worked harder. It wasn't I wish I'd made more money. It wasn't I wish I'd been more careful. The number one regret of people on their deathbeds was this: I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. At that land, the number one regret of dying people, people at the very end, people with nothing left to protect, no image to manage, no one to impress, just pure, raw, honest human reflection. Their biggest regret was not having the courage to be who they truly were, to live the life they truly wanted, to take the risks that their truest self was calling them to take. Not the risks their parents approved of, not the risks that made sense on paper, not the risks that their colleagues would respect or their neighbors would understand. The risks that their own soul was whispering about in quiet moments, the risks they talked themselves out of, the roads they didn't take, the doors they didn't knock on, the leaps they didn't make. And here's what I want you to feel right now. Because feelings are where change happens, not in the head, but in the chest. I want you to feel the weight of that. I want you to sit with that for a second. For a second. The idea that right now, in this moment, you might be standing at the beginning of a story that ends with that regret. That 20, 30, 40 years from now, you might look back at this exact moment. This moment right here, right now, and wish to God that you had been braver. Don't let that be your story. You don't have to let that be your story. The narrative is not written yet. You are holding the pen right now. In this moment, in this breath, you are still in the part of the story where the choice gets made. And the choice, the only choice that matters, is whether you take the risk. Let's talk about what risk actually looks like in real life, because I think we sometimes make it too abstract. We talk about risk like it's this big, grand, cinematic thing. Quitting your job and sailing around the world, selling everything and moving to Paris, climbing Mount Everest. And yes, those are risks. Beautiful, powerful, life-changing risks. But most risk doesn't look like that. Most risk is smaller than that. And that's not a weakness. That is actually where the revolution lives, in the small risks, in the daily acts of courage. Risk looks like raising your hand in the meeting when you have an idea that might be wrong. Risk looks like sending the email to the person who could change your career, even though they might not write back. Risk looks like telling someone you love them first, before you know if they feel the same way. Risk looks like starting the YouTube channel, starting the podcast, starting the blog, putting your work out into the world before you feel ready, before you feel good enough, before you have the perfect setup. Risk looks like saying no to the thing that pays well but kills your soul and trusting that something better is on the way. Risk looks like going to therapy and actually doing the work, actually looking at the things you've been hiding from, actually being honest with yourself. Risk looks like apologizing, like forgiving, like going first, like being vulnerable in a world that rewards armor. Risk looks like deciding that you are worth fighting for, that your dreams are worth fighting for. That the version of you that is possible, the highest, fullest, most alive version of you, is worth the discomfort of becoming. Every single day you are being asked to take small risks, and every single day most of us say no to those risks. And we don't notice it because each individual no seems harmless. One day of playing it safe, one moment of choosing comfort over courage. What's the harm? But those moments accumulate, those choices compound. And over time, the pattern of choosing safety over risk doesn't just shape your external circumstances, it shapes your identity. It shapes who you believe you are. You start to believe that you are a person who plays it safe. And that belief becomes a cage that no one else put you in. A cage you built for yourself, one small safe choice at a time. Until one day you look around and wonder why your life feels so small, so tight, so airless. And the answer is because you built it that way. Because you chose safe over alive over and over again until safe became all you knew how to choose. But here's the thing about cages you built yourself. You have the key. You have always had the key. I want to talk about Elon Musk for a moment. Not because I think he's a perfect person. He's not, nobody is. But because there is something about his approach to risk that I find almost incomprehensibly instructive. When PayPal was sold to eBay in 2002, Elon Musk received approximately $180 million. $180 million. And most people, most rational, sensible, careful people, would have taken a significant portion of that money and put it somewhere safe, invested it conservatively, enjoyed it, protected it. Elon Musk invested almost all of it into two companies, Tesla and SpaceX. Not because he was reckless, not because he didn't understand the risk, not because he was naive about how hard it would be, but because, and this is the key, he had done what he calls risk-adjusted thinking. He had asked himself, what is the cost of not trying this? For Tesla, the question was, if we don't build electric cars now, if we don't push the automotive industry towards sustainable energy now, what does that cost the planet? What does that cost future generations? For SpaceX, the question was, if humanity doesn't become a multi-planetary species, if we remain confined to one world, how vulnerable are we? How much do we risk everything by keeping all of our eggs in one earthly basket? The risk of trying to him was smaller than the risk of not trying. And in 2008, the same year, the global financial crisis nearly destroyed the world economy. Both Tesla and SpaceX came within weeks of going bankrupt. Within weeks, he had to make an agonizing choice about where to put the last of his money, the literal last, and he split it between them. In interviews from that time, he said he was having physical panic attacks. He said he couldn't sleep. He said he cried. He said it was the worst year of his life. This man, who appeared to the world as unflappable, as supremely confident, as almost inhuman in his ambition, was falling apart on the inside, and he kept going. And Tesla is now one of the most valuable companies in the world. And SpaceX has launched astronauts into orbit, landed rockets on floating platforms in the ocean, and is actively building the infrastructure for humanity to become a multi-planetary species. Because one man decided that the risk of trying was smaller than the risk of not trying. What is the risk of you not trying? What does the world lose if you don't take the risk that's sitting in your chest right now? I'm not asking about money. I'm not asking about fame. I'm asking, what version of this world is possible if you show up fully? If you take the leap? If you bet on yourself and go all in? Because I truly believe, that every person in this room has something the world needs. A perspective, a talent, a voice, a vision, a capacity to love or to lead or to create or to heal that is completely irreplaceably, unrepeatable yours. And when you play it safe, when you hide, when you shrink, when you say, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, this isn't the right time, I'll start tomorrow. When you do that, the world loses. Not just you, the world. I want to tell you about a concept that changed my life. It's called the regret minimization framework, and it was articulated by Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. When Jeff Bezos was working at a hedge fund in New York in 1994, he came across this new thing called the internet, and he saw something in it that most people couldn't see yet. He saw that commerce was going to move online, that the world of buying and selling was about to be fundamentally transformed, and he had an idea, an online bookstore, a place where people could buy any book ever published from anywhere in the world without leaving their house. His boss at the hedge fund told him it was a good idea, but that it was a better idea for someone who didn't already have a great job. Jeff Bezos had to make a decision. Stay safe, keep the well-paying, prestigious job on Wall Street, or leave it all behind and drive across the country to Seattle and start something from nothing, something that had never been done before, something that most people thought was crazy. And he developed this framework for making the decision. Ooh. He called it the regret minimization framework. He asked himself, when I'm 80 years old looking back at my life, which choice am I going to regret more? If I try this and it fails, will I regret it? Maybe a little, but failure is something I can recover from. Failure teaches me something. Failure is part of the journey. But if I don't try, if I stay safe, if I stay in this job, if I watch someone else build this thing that I can see so clearly, if I spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough, will I regret that? Yes. Will I regret that? I will regret that forever. So he left. He and his wife Mackenzie got in a car and drove across the country. She drove while he wrote the business plan in the passenger seat. They started Amazon out of a garage in Bellevue, Washington. And the rest is the story of how one man's willingness to risk something he had for something he wanted changed the way the entire human race shops, reads, consumes content, and does business. The regret minimization framework. I want you to use it right now. I want you to think about the risk you're afraid of, the leap you're not taking, the thing you want to do but haven't done. And I want you to ask yourself, when I'm 80 years old, which choice am I going to regret more? The risk of trying or the certainty of never having tried at all? Let me talk about something that nobody talks about enough when they talk about risk. And that's the cost of the people around you. Because when you start to change, when you start to grow, when you start to take risks and reach for something bigger, not everyone in your life is going to celebrate that. Some of them are going to resist it. Some of them are going to question it. Some of them, the ones who care about you most but fear change the most, are going to try to pull you back. Not because they're bad people, not because they don't love you, but because your growth is a mirror. And when you start moving toward the life you were meant to live, the people around you who haven't done that, who made the choice to stay safe, to stay small, to stay comfortable. They see your movement as a judgment of their stillness. They see your courage as a reminder of their fear. They see your risk as proof of everything they didn't do. And it's easier to pull you back down than to be inspired by you. This is one of the hardest parts of becoming a risk taker. Not the external obstacles, not the market conditions or the funding challenges or the technical problems, but the human cost. The conversations with family members who think you're making a mistake. The friends who slowly disappear when you stop being who they expected you to be. The partner who chose you when you were playing it safe and now doesn't recognize the person you're becoming. And I want to tell you, I know how hard that is. I know how much it hurts to pursue your own growth and feel like you're losing people in the process. I know the loneliness of that. But I also want to tell you this. The right people will not need you to stay small. The right people, the people who are truly meant to be in your life, the ones who love you not just for the comfortable version of you, but for the full, growing, striving, risk-taking version of you, those people will not be threatened by your expansion. They will be fueled by it. They will celebrate it. They will look at what you're doing and say, show me how. Take me with you. I want to see what's possible too. And the people who can't handle your growth, with love, with real, genuine, tender love, let them go. Because you cannot be both loyal to other people's limitations and loyal to your own potential. You have to choose. And the choice you make will determine everything. I want to spend a few minutes on something I call the myth of perfect readiness. There is a lie that we tell ourselves. A beautiful, seductive, perfectly reasonable lie. And the lie sounds like this. I'll do it when I'm ready. I'll start the business when I have enough money saved. I'll write the book when I have enough time. I'll go back to school when the kids are older. I'll reach out to that person when I've accomplished more. I'll take the leap when I'm more confident. I'll begin when I'm ready. And the truth, the devastating, liberating, life-changing truth is this. You will never be ready. Readiness is not a state you arrive at. It's not a destination. It's not something that happens to you when enough circumstances align in your favor. Readiness is a feeling that comes after the action, not before it. You don't get ready and then start. You start and then you get ready. You learn by doing. You build confidence by doing. You discover what you're capable of by doing, not by waiting until you feel capable. Every person who has ever done something great, every entrepreneur who built an empire, every artist who created something magnificent, every leader who changed history, every parent who raised children who changed the world, they all started before they were ready. They all showed up uncertain. They all began in the middle of not knowing. They all took the first step without being able to see the whole staircase. Because the staircase only reveals itself to people who are moving. If you're standing still, waiting to see the whole staircase before you take the first step, the staircase will never appear. It's not visible from a position of stillness. It is only visible from a position of motion. One step reveals the next step. One risk reveals the next risk. Reveals the next risk. One courageous choice makes the next courageous choice a little easier. And over time, slowly, beautifully, imperfectly, you become a person who is not waiting to be ready. You become a person who moves, who acts, who risks, who begins. You become a risk taker, not because you stop being afraid, but because you started moving anyway. There is a quote I love from the American poet and author Mary Oliver. She wrote, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" One wild and precious life. That's what you have. That's what every person in this room has. One life. One shot, one run at this beautiful, terrifying, heartbreaking, magnificent, overwhelming, gorgeous thing called being alive on this earth at this particular moment in this particular body with these particular people around you. One life. And the clock is running. It's running right now while you're sitting there. It ran while you slept last night. It'll run while you drive home today. It runs and runs and runs, and it doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It doesn't pause while you deliberate, while you overthink, while you talk yourself out of the thing you most need to do. Time is the one resource that is absolutely, irrevocably non-renewable. Money you can earn back. Relationships you can rebuild. Skills you can develop. Health you can recover. But time that has passed is gone. Every moment you spend in a life that is smaller than the one you were built for is a moment you cannot reclaim. I'm not saying this to frighten you. I'm saying this to wake you up. I'm saying this because I believe in you. I believe in the life that is possible for you. And I want that life for you so badly that I am willing to be uncomfortable, to say the hard things, to shake you a little. You only have this one wild and precious life. What are you going to do with it? Let me tell you about Walt Disney. Not the man you think you know from the movies and the theme parks and the fairy tales. Let me tell you about the real man. The man before the magic. Walt Disney was fired from his first newspaper job because, and I quote, his editor told him he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. He started his first animation company called Laugh-O-Gram Studio, and it went bankrupt. He moved to Hollywood with $40 in his pocket and almost nothing else. He pitched Mickey Mouse to a theater distributor who rejected it. He was told that the concept of a giant mouse on screen would terrify women. He went bankrupt again. He was told multiple times by multiple people in the film industry that he was not talented enough, not smart enough, not creative enough. He kept going. He built Disneyland, which almost every banker and investor he approached told him was a ridiculous idea, that nobody would drive to a theme park in the middle of the Orange County desert. He was turned down by 302 banks before he finally got financing. 302. And the man who lacked imagination, whose ideas weren't good enough, whose mouse would terrify women, who kept going broke, he built one of the most beloved creative empires in human history. A company that has generated more joy, more wonder, more magic for more children and families than almost anything else ever created.